tell you a little bit about Penny Joe. So Penny Joe is a Porsche 911. Penny Joe was born in 1984. Okay, so this car officially is almost 40 years old, which is pretty crazy, right? I like older cars. I like that they're analog. Penny Joe is actually the slowest car that I own. No lie. That's not what matters to me. Penny Joe is absolutely a momentum car. You've got to kind of keep in the sweet spot. Older Porsche 911s, especially in the mid 80s, they are air oil cooled, okay? Meaning that the air comes into a radiator that cools oil. There is no water, okay? We call them air cooled, and I honestly think air cooled is better. All right, so I'm going to tell you the story real quick of how I got Penny Joe. So I had this friend. His name is Bern Wilson. One of the coolest dudes, you could ever meet, okay? And Bern and we used to work with a home builder in the state of Utah. And so I would go to meetings with Bern, who's actually a superintendent or a construction manager for this builder. And our job with many other people, we would all meet together to talk about what transactions were coming, how the process was going, and whether or not the buyers could qualify. Okay, so we'd have these lunch meetings every week, and every week, I'd kind of get to know this guy, Bern. Now, Bern is a Kiwi, so I'm going to try to do my best impersonation of Bern here in a second, okay? But you just got to understand context. So Bern's a very kind of fit guy, ride mountain bikes, and Bern starts telling me about this love for cars. And he asked me one day, I had driven a Porsche to work. I don't even remember which Porsche it was, but he comes in, he's like, hey Jeff, is that your Porsche? It's the best I got, okay? And honestly, one of the coolest guys. He starts talking to me about it. He lets me nerd out about Porsche and how much I love them and 911. And I get telling him about like how much I want an air-cooled Porsche. Like I want an older Porsche. I had one maybe 10 years before, and I just didn't have a great experience with it. I didn't understand it. And at the time, I was just getting into Porsche, so like I had a turbo, 996 turbo, so it's all fast. And I get this older Porsche, I'm like, this thing is awful, okay? But something stuck with me from that older Porsche that made me want another one. And so we start talking, and this whole time we're talking, he's just letting me talk about Porsche. He doesn't even let me know that he has like multiple air-cooled Porsches, right? Like that's the kind of guy he is. He's just like letting me live this dream and like talk to him, and I'm so impassionate about it. And he finally says, well, yeah, I've got an older 911. And so I start talking to him about a track day. I'm like, you should come to the track. And sure enough, he commits to it. A couple weeks later, Bern shows up to the track, and he shows up in this car, Penny Joe, okay? 1984 Porsche 911, base model. There's nothing fancy about it, okay? These seats right here, this car has kind of been restored, but these seats are Bern seats, okay? So it's important to understand that. Shows up, it's got the little goofy leather car bra in the front instead of Clearplex. You know what I mean? But that's how the car came to him. So here's the story of how Bern got the car. He goes back all the way to when he had, essentially gotten out of high school, and he went on a holiday, like a walkabout, okay? Maybe college age. And in that walkabout, he was in Spain, okay? So guy leaves New Zealand, because he's a Kiwi, flies all the way to Spain with the backpack, basically, and he's on this adventure to go and find out who he is, which I think is rad. I didn't have the courage to do that. Maybe the same, but he's in Spain, and he sees this car. First Porsche 911 he's ever seen in person. He was fascinated. He went up to the guy who had gotten out of the car, and he's like, what is this? This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Guy is an American, believe it or not, and tells him, it's a Porsche 911. I just bought it. I'm doing the European experience in this car before I ship it back to the States. Okay? So somehow Bern and this buyer become friends. Like, it was the thing that like flipped the switch for Byrne. Like, he's now a Porsche guy, right? And like, he sees this car, they become friends, and years later, okay, so this is 1984, sometime in the 90s, Byrne starts acquiring other Porsches, and this car becomes available. Like, his friend that he made in 1984 meet in Spain. They become buddies over one thing: Penny Joe. Okay, so Byrne acquires the car in the early 2000s. So Byrne is the second owner, and I'm sure Byrne just feels like so stoked, because this is a European model, essentially a little bit more horsepower than what we got in America, about 40 more horse. And so Byrne has the car. I think he bought it with like 20,000 miles or something low, something crazy. And he put up 50,000 or so before I bought it. Okay. Now, fast forward, Byrne, brings the car to the track, and Byrne's never even been on a racetrack, but he's a really pretty good driver. Kind of overheats the brakes a little bit, which is pretty common for people that haven't been on the track, but had a blast. So we meet later for another pipeline meeting, and I tell Byrne, I'm like, dude, I want that car. I want that car. And he flat out said no. Like, it wasn't like, maybe I'll think about it. It was like, no. Like, cold, killer, stone cold, no. Right? Weeks after that, I just keep asking him. I'm like, Byrne, are you ready to sell that car? And honestly, I was kind of joking a little bit, but not joking. So I finally get Byrne to, commit to me. He says, I'm going to sell you the car. And it is November of, 2015 or 2016, something like, I honestly can't remember, but I write Byrne a check, okay? Now, mind you, 2-owner European car, right? Guards red, tan interior, like very, very 80s. And Byrne, when he goes to shake my hand on the sale, he says, Jeff, you have to promise me that you won't cut this car up. And you have to promise me that you will restore this car the way you and I talked about. Okay, so I kind of skipped a little bit there, but during our meetings, I had told him of my fascination with rally cars and how much I wanted a Porsche rally car. And he had told me like how amazing rally cars were, and like how stoked he was that I would be willing to build a rally car. So the condition of my purchase with Byrne was that Byrne required me to build this car into a rally car. And that's how Penny Joe came about. It took quite a bit of time for it to come to where it is now, and it's still not finished. It's never going to be finished, in my opinion, because, there's just stuff that I want to do forever. It's like a long-term relationship, if you will. You got to work on it, okay? But this is the car I will never sell, okay? So I built it into the rally car. I did all the suspension. I got Elephant Racing to give me adjustable spring plates, and I had to lift the car. I had to have Braid make wheels. There was a lot of stuff that I had to figure out. How I mounted the mud flaps. There was a lot. Okay, but the skid plates, the lights, all that stuff, kind of, I had to hodgepodge together. I had my really good friend Johnny Lang help me. He built the rack. He built the bumper bar in the front, the skid plate in the rear. Like, he built all of it, okay? Which means now I've got somebody else engaged in building this thing with me, which is, just awesome. You see how, like, Penny Joe is, like, bringing people together, right? So, fast forward a little bit later, the car's never completely finished, but it's mine, and I'm enjoying it. I'm going to try to... Byrne passed away. I didn't think I'd get all emotional. So Byrne passed away. He was riding his mountain bike, and he just had a heart attack. And you know, it's crazy for me to lose a friend that was so fit and so inspiring. And it made me realize how important it is to interact with people. And I get to do that through cars. So, one of the commitments I made was I would do what I promised to Burn. I would build the car, and that's what I've done. And, you know, there's a couple things I'm never going to change with the car, because that's the place that Burn was. Burn drove this car. And so, you know, the shift lever has this Momo steering knob. It's actually super goofy. It's straight out of the 80s. It's not my favorite, but I'll never change it. Never change it. Because it's been there. And it's been there with Burn. So, anyway, I don't mean to get all emotional. Normally I'm a little, you know, I'm a goofball. Like, I like to make jokes. Okay, so now you can see, right? You can see kind of the arc. You can see the reason why I could never sell this car. And the reason that I love it is this car brings people together. This car is something seriously magical because it can interact with people in a way that cars don't. Like, you know, my McLaren 720 doesn't do that. Like, it's not the same thing. People think it's cool. People don't come up and talk to me. But this car, they do. They like it. Some people laugh at it because it's got big headlights and stuff like that, but I don't care. That's it. So, moral of the story, cars are people too. Don't forget that. Cars are people too.